Collage as a fine art form is a relatively new form of expression. When mass-produced papers became available in the early part of the 20th century, artists were inspired to incorporate these materials into their own artwork. But by mid-century, technology made it possible to easily alter and reproduce images. Collage as a medium for visual storytelling became increasingly popular, and artists such as Romare Bearden used the medium as narration, arranging images and special paper pieces. They were meant to represent stories of life and culture within his own community. Collage represents tearing apart and joining back together, gathering, repurposing, and rebuilding, and that's what makes it so perfect for storytelling. Many of us have a photo bank, whether it's on a device or in a digital realm. That collection represents the stories that we have to tell, and today I'm going to demonstrate a process that takes images from that realm and brings them to life in the form of a narrative collage. Materials are simple, yet unlimited. Paper, of course. And I have with me here today a package called Paper by the Pound. And many people ask and wonder, how much is a pound of paper? Well, as you can see, it's a lot. You might want to also have construction paper, have a selection of textures and patterns, use books and magazines with care. In the past, collagists used what they found without any concern, but laws for protecting rights are much stronger now, and it's always more considerate to have permission. So look through your photo bank and find an image that represents a story that you'd like to share. It doesn't have to be special, just a simple everyday moment will provide the most personal subject. Print the image in black and white only. Now you may have noticed that I used a filter to polarize or simplify the image into just a few levels of gray. This is an option I'd recommend simply because it uses less ink or toner and it just makes it a little easier to see the edges in a photo. We can use paint as part of our process. You could also use markers or colored pencils, etc. I'm using today a watercolor that's known as gouache, and I'm using that to paint the photocopy. It has a flat, very opaque look to it, almost like the paper itself. I'm going to just follow along the areas, mixing a color. I have a brown, a yellow, a black, a white, and you might want to add a little red or a little orange or something, but really you can mix natural skin tones simply with those few colors, but they don't have to be natural skin tones. Of course, you can use some imaginary colors as well if you'd like. I'm going to put this aside and bring out two of the figures that I've already painted, following the shapes created by the posterizing filters. Kind of gives it a real collage-like look, really as if they've been cut from paper. Now, you can use paper. You notice I've left the clothing part. I'd like to bring some pattern and texture into that. So I'm going to demonstrate a real easy way. I've selected a paper that I'd like to use for her top, and then I'm going to take a piece of carbon paper and I'm just going to use a pencil and kind of trace over the area that her shirt will be using. And notice I went ahead and removed that beverage. I can get to that later. I can cut that out. And then we'll just glue that in place. I'm using a glue that is specifically designed for collage. Buckling paper is an issue that every artist has to deal with. We may want to incorporate the wrinkles, really, if we really want to get texture, but for the most part, we're going to want this to lie flat. Moisture evaporating from the glue causes it to shrink and pull at the surface. And a collage typically uses a lot of glue. There's a lot of tension. For best results, we don't want to over-apply and brush it on as flat as possible. I'm going to go ahead and, while I'm talking, glue these images down, brushing all the way to the edges of the paper. It dries clear, so don't worry about getting it over areas. Put it in place, and for best results, push it down with your fingers, burnish it, get it as flat as possible. Now I created the background using patterned papers, and if you go back to the original photo, you'll see that I really have imagined the background in many ways. I picked out papers that reminded me of wallpaper and upholstery. This will help the narrative because it's taking place inside of a restaurant. I like this image because there's obviously a conversation taking place. The figures give us clues, the way that the hands are held and the attention that's being paid to the speaker. And the colors that you choose can really describe the mood. Let me just show you a finished example or two using the same image. I've got 3 different versions here. The color choices really just alter the mood and give you a whole different interpretation of the story. Now, in cases like this where you notice the figures kind of blend into the background, everything seems to be of equal importance. And this is where adding a little bit more paint back into the collage can really come in handy. For instance, I can take a little bit of the black paint and I can create shadows over the paper behind the figure. This will help separate them, give it a little bit more depth, even underneath where his arm is coming across the tablecloth. We can also add a little bit of highlighting using some white. So are you ready to tell your story? Gather your paper, find your photo, and visit dickblick.com for glue, gouache, and anything else you might need to make a narrative collage. We have a PDF of this lesson with step-by-step instructions and photos. And while you're there, browse through the hundreds of lesson plans and thousands of art supplies we have.